You ever wondered who your ancestors were? I'm not talking about your grandparents or even your great-grandparents. I mean your hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors. Well, as it turns out, every person on Earth today can trace their roots back to two distinct ancestors, a man and a woman who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. These two people, often referred to as genetic Adam and mitochondrial Eve, weren't the first humans, nor were they a couple. They lived in different places and different times, separated by thousands of years. Yet, through the curious pathways of genetic inheritance, they are the only two individuals whose genetic material has survived untouched, in specific ways, in all of us. Yes, all of us. So how is it possible that we all share these two ancestors? And how do scientists even know this? Scientists have found that we're 99.9% genetically identical. To understand how this works, you need to know a bit about our DNA. DNA is like a blueprint, carrying all the information needed to build and maintain our bodies. Think of it as the Lego instructions to build our bodies. We inherit DNA from both our parents, but not all DNA behaves the same way. First, there's mitochondrial DNA. This type of DNA is found in mitochondria, tiny structures within our cells that provide energy. What's interesting about mitochondrial DNA is that it's passed down exclusively from mother to child. The reason is simple. Egg cells contain a lot of mitochondria, while any mitochondria in sperm are destroyed after fertilization. This means that the mitochondrial DNA you have today came directly from your mother, who got it from her mother, and so on, in an unbroken chain that stretches back through time. Then there's the Y-chromosome, which is part of our genetic material that determines gender. If you're biologically male, you have one X and one Y chromosome and received that Y chromosome solely from your biological father. Your father got it from his father, and on in an unbroken line of men passing their Y chromosomes down through the generations. Now, because mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome are passed down in these special ways, almost unchanged from generation to generation, scientists realized that they could trace these particular pieces of genetic material back in time. By studying the patterns of small mutations that accumulate in mtDNA and Y chromosomes, researchers discovered that all humans today share a single common female ancestor for mitochondrial DNA and a single common male ancestor for the Y chromosome. As fascinating as it is to think about our connections to mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam, it's equally intriguing to consider how the randomness of genetic drift and population bottlenecks have shaped our genetic heritage. Imagine a small group of early humans, perhaps due to a natural disaster or a migration event, becomes isolated from the larger population. This small group carries only a fraction of the genetic diversity of the original population. Over generations, due to the limited gene pool, certain genetic traits become more common while others disappear. This phenomenon is known as a genetic bottleneck. Similarly, genetic drift is the random fluctuation of gene variants in a population. Unlike natural selection, which favors traits that enhance survival and reproduction, genetic drift is all about chance. You might be wondering, if we all share mitochondrial Eve's DNA and Y chromosomal Adam's Y chromosome, does that mean the rest of our DNA comes from them too? Not quite. In fact, most of our genetic material comes from countless other ancestors who lived alongside or even long after these two individuals. The key thing to remember is that mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomes represent only tiny parts of our overall genome. They're useful for tracing these specific lineages because they don't recombine like most of our DNA does. The majority of our genetic material is a complex mosaic, a patchwork quilt woven from the contributions of many ancestors. Each generation, DNA from our parents is shuffled through a process called recombination, creating new combinations of genes. This genetic shuffling ensures that while we carry some markers from our ancient ancestors, most of our DNA is a blend of countless others. The average human genome contains about 3 billion base pairs. Mitochondrial DNA accounts for just about 16,000 of those, and the Y chromosome, if you're male, adds another 58 million. That leaves billions of base pairs inherited from a multitude of ancestors. This genetic diversity is why siblings can look and act so differently despite sharing the same parents. Our genetic heritage is like a vast library, with each book representing a different ancestor. Some books are ancient, telling stories from tens of thousands of years ago, while others are more recent, reflecting the last few centuries. Together, they form the narrative of who we are today. While the theory of evolution explains how life diversifies and adapts, the origin of life itself remains one of the most profound questions in science. Several theories attempt to explain how life began on Earth, each with its own body of evidence and counter-arguments. Today, we'll explore three prominent hypotheses: the RNA world hypothesis, panspermia, and the hydrothermal vent hypothesis. First, let's delve into the RNA world hypothesis. This theory suggests that before DNA and proteins, life was based on ribonucleic acid, or RNA. Unlike DNA, RNA can store genetic information and catalyze chemical reactions, making it a versatile molecule. Some scientists believe that RNA molecules capable of self-replication could have formed spontaneously in the prebiotic world. Evidence for this hypothesis includes the discovery of ribozymes, RNA molecules with enzymatic functions, and the ability of RNA to form under prebiotic conditions in laboratory experiments. However, critics argue that the spontaneous formation of RNA in the harsh conditions of early Earth is highly improbable, and the transition from RNA to the complex machinery of modern cells remains unclear. Next, we have the panspermia hypothesis, which proposes that life did not originate on Earth but was instead brought here from elsewhere in the universe. This could have occurred through comets, meteorites, or other celestial bodies carrying microbial life. Supporters of panspermia point to the discovery of amino acids and other organic molecules in meteorites, as well as the resilience of certain microorganisms to extreme conditions, including the vacuum of space. However, this theory raises more questions than it answers, such as how life originated elsewhere and survived the journey through space. While intriguing, panspermia does not provide a definitive explanation for the origin of life. Lastly, let's explore the hydrothermal vent hypothesis. This theory posits that life began in the deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where mineral-laden water heated by volcanic activity provides a rich environment for chemical reactions. The discovery of diverse ecosystems thriving around these vents, independent of sunlight, supports this idea. Additionally, the presence of simple organic molecules and the catalytic properties of vent minerals lend credibility to the hypothesis. Critics, however, question whether the conditions in these vents could sustain the delicate balance required for the emergence of life, and how life could transition from the extreme environments of the deep sea to more varied habitats on the surface. Each of these theories offers fascinating insights and challenges, reflecting the complexity and mystery of life's origins. As scientific techniques advance, we may inch closer to unraveling this enigma, piecing together the story of how life began on our planet. Evolution is the change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. This process occurs when evolutionary mechanisms such as natural selection and genetic drift act on genetic variation, resulting in certain traits becoming more or less common within a population over time. The scientific theory of evolution by natural selection was independently conceived by two British naturalists, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, in the mid-19th century. Darwin detailed these ideas in his seminal work, On the Origin of Species. Evolution by natural selection is founded on observable facts. More offspring are produced than can possibly survive. Traits vary among individuals. Different traits confer different rates of survival and reproduction, and these traits can be passed down through generations. As a result, populations evolve over successive generations, favoring traits that improve survival and reproduction. In the early 20th century, the integration of evolutionary theory with Mendelian genetics and population genetics gave rise to modern evolutionary theory. This synthesis confirmed that DNA molecules are the basis for heredity, passing information from generation to generation. Processes like natural selection, genetic drift, mutation, and gene flow drive changes in DNA within populations. All life on Earth, including humanity, shares a last universal common ancestor, which lived approximately 3.5 to 3.8 billion years ago. The fossil record traces the progression from early biogenic graphite to microbial mat fossils to fossilized multicellular organisms. Current biodiversity patterns have been shaped by the formation of new species, changes within species, and extinctions throughout evolutionary history. Today, evolutionary biologists use genetic sequences to reconstruct phylogenetic trees, offering more precise insights than ever before. Their discoveries have influenced not just biology, but also fields like agriculture, medicine, and computer science. From understanding the complexities of our DNA to developing new medical treatments, the journey of discovery continues.